Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm Ffinlo Costain. With progress on world hunger in reverse, global food experts are calling for an urgent shift to more localised and resilient food provision to achieve the goal of zero hunger by 2030. Belay is an IPES Food Expert and co-founder and general coordinator of the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. I asked him why local markets and local food chains are important globally.
To begin with, they are accessible and they are close to people. The food that you get from these markets is also diverse. Diversity means resilience, diversity means health. So it's a healthy food that you get. And also they have economic and social benefits to local people. There are millions and billions of people who depend on these markets. I mean, in Africa, basically, these are the markets that people depend on. You see, so they are very much important. They are also resilient. They are resilient against shocks in most of the cases. Because when things happen, when local economic and social war and gets out of control, people do rely on these markets usually because they are very close to people.
You mentioned that Africa still has lots of local food chains, while of course the global north has shifted to greater reliance on global supply. Do you think that the global north could learn from Africa and that it should actually start to shorten its food supply chains again?
Hopefully. I mean, in so many places, they serve the people. I think one thing that we all agree is the future is unpredictable. There's a lot of unpredictability. Nobody has predicted what has happened in the last 3, 4, or 5 years. Nobody. We are in a crisis, and this unpredictability will increase in the future. So when you are living in an unpredictable world, what do? You have to learn how to become resilient. And these small and territorial markets are at the core of the resilience of the system. So yes, they should.
The report talks about resilience in the face of mounting shocks. You just referred to them there. What sort of shocks do you have in mind, and what impact have they had on food availability where you live in Ethiopia and where you're working now in Uganda?
I can mention a few of them. The first is pandemics. I'm not referring only to COVID because in the future also there might be other pandemics, and they are exacerbated by the global food system, as you know. So during COVID time, what has happened is there was lockdown to varying degree, and most people who lived in the urban area have suffered because food comes from rural areas. But even for urban people, these are the markets closer to people who serve these people. So we're talking about pandemics and shocks. And the war between Ukraine and Russia, it has affected every person globally. But the cost of oil and fuel and artificial fertilizers has increased. So the cost of everything has shot up in Africa. So during this time, people started to rely much more on what they can get locally, rather than on these expensive things from outside. So that's what one of the issues. And the variability of the market. I can give you an example. For example, in 2000, the coffee prices has really gone down, really. So there were so many farmers in Ethiopia who depended on this global coffee market. So when the global coffee market collapsed, their livelihood was affected. So much so that they started to cut some of these trees and sell them as foods to get food and money and fuel and whatever. So the vulnerability of this global food system is also a cause for concern, in terms of resilience.
The report says that global industrialized food chains are exacerbating hunger and reducing resilience. How are they doing that?
It is a question of accessibility. There are only 4 companies own 90% of the food system now. Only 4 of them. The Archer Daniels, Bunji, Cargill, Louis Dairy. They control 90% of the grain production. So during what we have observed during the Ukraine in Russia conflict, they were speculating on grain. So people who depend on wheat, for example, in North African people, they couldn't get wheat for bread. So that was a disaster. So access is very much important. And since they are controlled by the few, the whole chain is controlled by the few, equity, the question of equity is very much important. So farmers couldn't control them. The autonomy and agency of farmers is hugely affected also because of this market. They don't have a say in what they sell, where they sell, these kind of things, because the food system is controlled by this few actors. It also affects the diversity of food, as I said, the diversity, because they limit you to few grains, a few crops, increasingly. So when diversity decreases in the resilience of the system will decrease. It will have a health impact, and it will have also the impact of in terms of the what farmers can sell, what farmers cannot sell. So many. It has an environmental impact, so many impacts.
You've talked about corporates there, but at an international level, are policy and funding mechanisms from international organisations such as the World Bank or the UN or the EU, are they generally improving the situation, or are they actually making the situation worse?
Well, these are a combination of actors that you mentioned. It's very difficult to put them in one basket. For example, the IMF and the World Bank, they actually pushed structural adjustments in so many African countries, market liberalization, reduction of subsidies, and privatization. This has a huge impact on Africa. The trade liberalization has opened our market for foreign goods, and farmers cannot compete with this one. And it has also an impact on food security on people, because farmers start to depend on agricultural inputs that are coming from outside. And also, when you open your door for trade, for competition and whatever, even the EU also pushes to some extent for that, because they are entering into bilateral relationship with Africa for their own purposes, It's not like an aid or a friendship agreement. It's mostly a trade agreement. So they want the market, the African market. What does it mean for African farmers and food producers and for these local markets all over Africa? It's not an equal relationship, see? So that affects food security hugely. And also, what's very sad is the trading happens in few crops. So you have to destroy your diversity to focus on few crops, which are important for the outside market. And that decreases the diversity, and that exposes you to shocks.
The report says that agroecological food systems and soil health are critical for maintaining environmental and economic resilience. What are the dangers to regional and global security if these local food systems and local soils fail?
I think the first one will be decreased food security. It will decrease food security, mainly because it decreases productivity. It will increase on imports, increasing number of Africans are importing more and more food because of the decrease in the soil quality and the impact on the food system. Environmental degradation is very much important. Soil degradation affects almost everything. Biodiversity, impacts on biodiversity is huge, especially on agro biodiversity or agroecological biodiversity. Pollution, chemical pollution. These inputs, the chemicals in the pesticides and artificial fertilizers would pollute the environment. The climate crisis is exacerbating the climate crisis, because when the soil is bad, it doesn't even sequester enough carbon dioxide. So that's also a problem. It has economic and social impacts. Because it leads to loss of livelihoods. It has also cultural impacts because the knowledge of the people, the innovativeness of the people will decrease. Resource exploitation, there's huge resource exploitation, and there's a scarcity of water that's happening also locally. So these are all the problems that would come, because of the agroecological food system and soil impact.
Do you also see security impacts in terms of conflict and migration?
Hugely. I think in some extent it leads to competition for resources. I mean, we see now that pastoral and agrarian communities are in conflict all over Africa, and also land conflicts are increasing. It is tearing social fabrics, in our community. So it can lead to so many things because we have an increasing number of people. Population increase is not by itself, if properly managed, not a problem. But if there is no management or handling, then it becomes a real crisis. So the migration is happening. A lot of people are going out for opportunities, actually.
And just finally, Million, what policy outcomes are you and IPES Food calling for?
One important outcome is, I think we want the increase in investment in these markets. These are very critical markets. Now the focus is on building supermarkets and whatever, but we need to focus on this small market. That's very much important. Procurement, procurement. There are a lot of public procurements. The school feeding programs are all over now in Africa. It's increasing in Ethiopia, in my country. So where does that food comes from? So it should come from this local market. That's very much important. We need also to protect these markets from corporate ownership. That's very much important. It's also local. Some of these urban small markets, urban territorial markets are claimed by rich people because they want to build, high-rising buildings and whatever. So we need to protect them. But the most important in the long-term solution is to really encourage agroecology. Agroecology is very much that is social, environmental, it's food security. It's a holistic system. So that encouraging that agroecological system is so critical. That's what we want. Our decision makers, everybody who's putting money into African food system should focus on is on agroecology, because under agroecology we sit on the broader sphere of food sovereignty, the local control of markets, healthy foods, the way you produce the healthy and sustainable way of producing your food are all important.
That was Million Belay from IPES Food. More news as ever on our website 8.9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.